It is such a problem in Israel that the Hamas, these terrorists that live right next to them in this so-called Gaza Strip,
Mhm.
they literally are firing rockets daily, firing munitions of whatever sort into Israel just randomly. And it
Mhm.
is such a bad situation that the government of Israel has mandated by law that each and every home has to be retrofitted with a bomb shelter, effectively, right? Okay.
Absolutely. Yes.
Now the problem with the bomb shelter is that it's built for bombs.
Right.
When individuals would run into these shelters for protection, they may not necessarily lock. They may not necessarily propel like a home invader. And definitely they're not fireproof. And by that, I mean there were many times where they couldn't get into the panic room or they weren't sure if somebody was hiding. We'll just go ahead and call it a bomb shelter, whatever term we use.
Mhm.
Effectively, what was going on, they were burning these structures to the ground, and anybody that left the building, they just simply shot them.
Right.
Is that your understanding?
Yeah.
Is there anything you could add to that?
Um,
Is that pretty well it?
yeah, there were also some bomb shelters that they simply just threw a grenade into and everybody blew up. So there were two survivors in one of the bomb shelters where that happened. They were actually a couple, and they basically played dead under a ton of dead bodies. But both of them had their arms blown off from the grenade. And they were the only two survivors in that room of probably about 30 to 40 people.
And they still have that one young man that actually had his arm blown off,
Yeah.
and he's still a hostage. I forgot his name,
Yes.
but he is in the custody of Hamas at this time. The back inside this kibbutz,
Mhm.
you had all these terrible crimes going on. You were mentioning even what they were doing to pregnant women about removing babies from them, putting them in the oven. Is this not reminiscent of the Holocaust?
Absolutely. And everything we're seeing in the US, all of the protests and all of the propaganda and all of the hatred toward Jews in the US is so reminiscent of pre Holocaust Europe. So it's a little scary that it seems to be spreading over here as well. But it is incredibly reminiscent of the Holocaust, and that's why this is such a big deal to Israel for them to be responding the way they are, because this is the first event of this kind of like to this degree that this many people were killed in such horrible, torturous ways
Mhm.
that brings us right back to where we were before Israel became a country.
It just shocks the conscience.
Yeah.
All of these crimes. I don't think the mainstream, what I call the legacy media, the vast majority of the coverage, I simply think they don't cover these type of stories. They just will not put this information out for whatever reason. I have my own suspicions as to why they do not put this information out, disseminate it, but it needs to be talked about. As a matter of fact, I believe we were talking about this earlier, you and I in private, but I think it was the CEO of Facebook, Sheryl Sanders, if that's her name, the author of the book Lean In. She has made a YouTube video. I believe it's titled something like From Silence to Screams, where she documented these types of crimes that were launched against these Israelis. It's just shocking. And I believe there was another film that was put together that was actually shown to the government in Israel. I believe they call it the Knesset. Is that correct? The
Yes.
government. Okay.
Mhm.
And I remember the lawmakers were leaving in tears. And
Yeah.
it is very smart on the part of the Israeli government to document all this. I'm assuming that they know from the Holocaust that over time people are going to, oh, this never happened. This is exaggerated. This is a big lie. Is that what you think on this?
I do. Well, the documentation actually is coming directly from Hamas. So they were the ones recording, they were the ones sending it out.
That's a good
And the
point.
reason, yeah, so the reason for that is really just because this is celebrated. People who there's a video that went viral of one of the terrorists that is calling his mom completely, in tears, super excited, talking about how many people he killed and it's amazing. And she said, you're a blessing, you're a martyr. I'm so proud of you. You're my son. But these videos are being shared just, first of all, I think in order to cause a sort of psychological warfare against Jews that aren't in Israel. So when they see it, it just kind of messes with people who aren't there. They're still kind of starting a war towards us. But at the same time, I think that it's also because they really are proud of these things. Like, these are things they're proud of. So
I saw some video myself of I believe it was near the beginning when this attack was going down. You had these Hamas soldiers or terrorists, whatever you want to call them. They show up at this kibbutz, and you have individuals trying to get in. It was like an electronic gate opening, and they just literally opened fire, just shoot them dead in their cars where they're at. I mean, I cannot imagine that happening in America. I guess we can. We had something like that happen on 9/11. Do the people in Israel look at this event, this tragic event, do they look at it the same way as an American looks at 9/11?
absolutely, yes. This is really Israel's 9/11, 100%. Yes.
And I think I believe if you took the population of Israel and you compared to how many people died in this terrorist attack, it would be something to where I think somebody told me it'd be the equivalent of 20 or 30,000 Americans dying versus the number that died in Israel. Is that your understanding also?
Yes, yeah, that's accurate.
How many deaths were there, if you know, on October 7th?
There were 1,200 deaths on October 7th,
Wow.
but that number is still growing. I mean, they recently found some bodies that they had not been able to find that they assumed were hostages because they didn't hear from them, and they found their bodies at the festival. So that number is continuing to grow. They still don't know the exact number because things are just coming out constantly. And also, you have to think about the hostages that we're not sure if they're dead or alive. So that number definitely could be higher.
It's just unbelievable what's going on. And you have these kids going around these colleges, taking over these colleges, breaking windows, breaking into buildings, all this violence, all this nonsense. What is it that they're not understanding?
In my opinion, I think people are getting a lot of their news from TikTok, Instagram, these sorts of things that aren't official news sites, where they're just seeing tiny clips with no context. I think that the context is important. People want to say it's not, and I completely disagree. You know, for example, when Al Shifa Hospital was bombed and people kept saying that Israel did it, and Hamas said that Israel did it, and then later they found out that it was a failed missile from Hamas that killed its own people, and nobody corrected it. You know, people just moved on. Okay, that's not news anymore because it's not against Israel. So I feel like people are coming into this with an agenda. They already have their mind made up, and everything that they see, they're just using that, adding to their bank of why they're correct, instead of coming into it with an open mind and asking the right questions of why is this happening? Why are they fighting back? Why aren't they one big state? What's the backstory? Like, people aren't asking those questions, and I think those are really important questions to ask, because there's a lot of misinformation and people are just jumping on a cause because they want a cause.
I think so too. And I think a lot of the information that we're hearing as far as casualties, individuals that have died, this so-called famine that's supposed to be going on, this is information that is coming directly from Hamas. And
Right.
we don't know if the information is correct or if it is false information trying to influence public opinion. What say you?
Absolutely. I mean, these numbers are, in my opinion, completely fabricated, but here's what I say. So it took 30 days for Israel to come up with the number of how many people were killed. 30 days. So it doesn't really make sense logically that Hamas is adding thousands to their numbers every single day. There's no way they can count that many in every single day.